and welcome everyone to this webinar titled Personalized, Compliant, Empathetic, Enabling Strategic Policyholder Communication with Agentic AI. And I'm pleased to have two folks who are experts both in AI, but also in communication as well. I have Leslie Sapienza from OSG and Bobby Shrestha from Solvraise. Going to give both of you guys a little bit of an opportunity for an elevator pitch. Leslie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so glad all of you could join us today. I lead the insurance practice at OSG after a 26-year career with Prudential, where I led customer communications management for the US for Prudential. OSG is a customer communication management and experience solution provider. We offer print and mail services as well as digital delivery and interactive multi-channel experience.
And Bobby?
So hello, everyone. Bobby Shrestha, co-founder, CEO of Solvraise. And our vision and mission on Solvraise is how can we automate that messy back office work in insurance? So our goal is how can we connect to your systems like policy systems, servicing systems, your legacy systems, and then use agentic AI to orchestrate tasks, trigger workflows, and deliver accurate real-time information. So instead of ripping out your core, our goal is how can we make your systems work together without rip and replace?
Yep. Huge, obviously a huge issue. And we're going to focus our conversation on communication. And I want to start off with, I think there's confusion as to what actually AI is. I think everyone just assumes it's, oh yeah, I have ChatGPT. So AI, that's what it is. But we're talking already about there's AI and then there's generative AI and there's agentic AI, and they're not exactly the same. Bobby, why don't we get started with you? Can you talk about some of the differences that exist around what these concepts are and why ChatGPT is not the end all be all when it comes to AI?
No, that's a great question. It's a great question, and I'm going to make it like super, super simple. So when we think about AI, let's think about like a grocery store.
Okay.
AI in general, or I would say automation in general, is like a smart grocery store employee. You ask that employee, hey, take me to the pasta aisle or take me to where I can get sugar for my cake. It's going to know exactly what aisle, what shelf, or even what brand you should look at. So when you think about AI and slash automation, it's fast, it's accurate, it's knowledgeable, right? But it's not creating anything new. It's just helping you find the answers. So when we think about Gen AI and you ask that same and you sprinkle in Gen AI with this grocery store employee, it's going to say, okay, pasta with mushrooms. It's going to whip up recipes and something. Maybe you get like a really good recipe, or sometimes you not get such a good recipe, but it's creating it, right? It's creating these two ingredients. But it's not really great with rules, measurements, compliance, right? It's just creating stuff. But when we think about agentic AI, it's like you tell it pasta and somebody's running up to go to the pasta aisle, get that pasta, and give it to you. Like, it's like I always call it, it's like the assistant that we wish we had, but we didn't have before, but now we do. And I think that's, agentic AI doesn't cook your meal. It could, right, if you instruct it, but it's really typically orchestrating the whole store to get you what you're wanting from that grocery store and packaging it up so that you can do with it what you want to do with it.
Grocery store metaphor. I love it. I'm going to use that from now on. Leslie, what I think would be helpful here before we tie the AI piece to policyholder communication is for you, given your background, both at Prudential, but now at OSG, where you get to see a bunch of different companies and how they operate around communication, is to talk about the current state of communication so we can tie the AI piece to it. from what in your vantage point, policyholder communication, what is the current state of it?
The current state is that we're stuck in this very static, two-dimensional, hyper-focus on regulatory compliance as the be-all, end-all, as opposed to the customer experience. We all know that insurance is very complex. The products are very technical. The average consumer, outside of personal lines insurance, we all have homes, cars, things like that. Our experience in purchasing insurance and then managing that as a financial asset is daunting for the average consumer. And customer communications and insurance don't really help that problem. They more exacerbate it. They're very much treated as regulatory obligations, things that we must do, and how we do them, when we do them, what we say in those communications, without a lot of thought until recently about how our communications part of the operational service model, how are customers reacting to them, how do they view an insurance carrier? And with shifting demographics, the expectations just continue to rise that all of my experiences are going to be similar, right, to a Google, an Amazon, a Netflix. I want it to be easy. I want it to be easy to understand. I want it to understand me. And so right now we're in that gap, right? We know what it could be or should be, but how do we get there? Because we have those legacy and data challenges that hopefully the various types of AI solutions are going to help us overcome to make it an end-to-end better experience.
Yeah. And Bob, you have experience with this. So in your prior role where you were working on the claim side with life insurers, you must have seen this. It must have been something that irked you as well for you to want to start another business that dealt with this. What is from your vantage point, how did you see specifically claims communication and how companies dealt with it?
Even bigger than claims communication, right? Like when we think about, it's a statistic that I've used in a lot of my presentations where we know statistically 86% of people like you and I will switch we'll switch brands just so that we can get better customer service. And I think it's going to be naive for us to think insurance is otherwise, right? Like it's naivety for the industry to think that we can get away with bad customer experience, because if you look at the younger generation, that's experience. Like what Leslie is talking about is what matters. And when we think about on the claim side, a lot of some of the work that we used to do was about advocating for how do we build that customer first experience to a process that is so daunting, like a claims process. How do we make it better? And if you don't focus on the experience, how are you going to carry out that promise, right? Are you going to really allow them to navigate this pain throughout that journey, right?
Yeah.
And even Nick, how I even got into entrepreneurship was through the claim process, right? It wasn't death claims because I'm still alive. It was my maternity benefits, right? Like when you think about my maternity benefits was tied to a disability product. And as a technologist who's worked in corporate, my only digital option was a fax machine. This is why I wanted to eradicate faxes in that journey, because how can we give customers, me, that experience if we're still having to maneuver through a fax machine? How many of us own a fax machine?
I've known you for years. I didn't even actually know that story.
Yeah.
Really?
It was the genesis of Docsmore. Docsmore was created because Sovan and I had such a hard time navigating, as soon as we had a baby, forms galore. And that's why Docsmore was our first company, was do more with documents. It was how do we make it better and make it like a digital first operation when it comes to documents, right? So we wanted to create a better DocuSign, to be honest with you. But that was the journey that led us into doing some of the work that we did in claims. And now we saw a bigger pinpoint with automation and system-to-system integration. And that's the journey that we're on with Soulways.
Yeah. Right.
And
So,
like,
I mean,
I just want to interject quickly that when you think about the communication experience, it's not just the end customer, but it's also the agents and brokers that are part of that cycle. There's just as many B2B communications that could be a much better experience and ease of doing business. And if you want your carrier to get as much shelf space, right, for your products, then the easier you make it to do business with you, the more likely those independent agencies are going to, or those broker general agents are going to highlight your carrier and your percent.
it's so, Leslie, going back to something you said prior around communication strategy for most, maybe the vast majority of insurance organizations is regulatory oriented. It is, Bobby, it sounds exactly like that's what you went through. Like you had a maternity, you had to file a claim, and this is the route you have to go. They made it even harder by doing it by fax machine. But like, to me, that's not that's not a communication strategy. That is a one size fits all. We're going to do the bare minimum that's required, which leaves a big window. But Leslie, maybe you can speak to, because you've seen this as well, how much of communication strategy is that one size fits all? We're checking the box, which means they're just coding for the bare minimum.
So I think it's a little unfair that I don't think most carriers are trying to do the bare minimum. But I do think that because insurance carriers by nature are in the business of managing risk, that they treat their communications as another risk management aspect. So there's definitely regulatory content and timing and delivery rules and all sorts of things that you need to adhere to, as well as being able to prove that you have actually sent and delivered these communications in the timeframes necessary, right? So we all know about that. The language and the way that we present the information is often designed to protect the carrier, to make sure that they've met all of those Department of Insurance regulations. So the focus is on what do I have to do? And you can still do what's required, but do it in a better way. And depending on the line of business, especially in life and annuities, you're still servicing products that you created and sold a very long time ago, and they might not really be part of your active portfolio. So oftentimes it's a question of prioritization. And where are you going to invest in modernizing that experience? Do you want to do it with the customers that you already have or the customers that you hope to get? And looking at the value of those customers. So oftentimes decisions have to be made. But I think with the right technology, you could be addressing that entire set of circumstances and not have to make those choices, which in the end don't benefit the customer.
I'm thinking of, if we're going to go past the bare minimum, and I believe you, Leslie, I don't think insurance companies want to do the bare minimum. I think they almost fall into it just because they're risk averse. They have a lot of regulatory pressure on them. So a lot of it is making sure that it's like, hey, this document needs to be out within 30 days. Let's just make sure that happens, and someone codes it out. And when you read those documents, sometimes they sound threatening. So how do you go, before we jump into the AI piece for this, how do you think about that kind of document? A claim occurs, you have to have some kind of acknowledgement within 30 days. What would be some sort of structure or strategy behind that to make it just not like a legalese document? Hey, we had to send this out to you just because we're required to do it, and turn it into something that's a little bit more empathetic.
So it really starts with understanding what the universe of your communications are and all of the content and the rules that drive all of that. In most insurance carriers, those communications they're not Word documents. Some of them are Word documents sitting on a share drive, but talk about a policy or a contract or an annual statement. Those are complex documents that weave together a lot of business rules and data in order to produce the content that you see laid down on the page. And the content management and composition platforms that are behind that are oftentimes not as flexible as more modern ones. So you're stuck in a legacy composition model or content management model. And there are definitely AI strategies to help you evaluate that universe of content, identify where you're using content objects in more than one place, and then try to reverse engineer the rules that are driving the usage of all that content. So you got to get a handle on what you're doing now so that you can then start to change the tone of those. And there are also content management tools that offer AI sentiment analysis to help you rewrite things in layman's terms or in a user-friendly way and reading. So there's definitely a universe of AI tools that can assist with that as well. But being able to decompose all of your communications into their discrete pieces and parts, and then be able to raise that language and augment it with hyper-personalized data that really talks about your relationship with that customer, as opposed to just these facts and figures and the minimum amount of data that you're sending.
Bobby, when we were preparing for this, I think this is something that you brought up, was AI cannot be a magic wand if your data is broken. And I think that's what SoulRaise is trying to solve, is like you have some legacy systems, right? So how can you leverage the information and data that's there to get to a point where you can make it personal? Can you talk about that challenge? Because I think a lot of folks that might be listening to this are going to have that challenge. Some folks are going to be on mainframes. There's definitely a technical debt that's there. But to Leslie's point, if you don't have the data, or if you don't have the data readily available, then you're not going to be able to then structure something where you can drop the necessary information into a document and make it accurate and personal to a policyholder, but also empathetic at the same time. It seems like a Mount Everest of a task.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this when we were at prep, right? The amount. And I was sharing something that Leslie shared with us at prep, and I actually shared it with another colleague of mine. Like in 2023, when we entered, or 2023 when we entered, or 2024 when we entered ITC, what do we see? Gen AI is going to solve the world's problems. What do we see in 2025? And to say it, I'm sorry, like basic common sense automation. You don't need agentic AI. You don't need this is why I get so excited about some of the work that we're doing at SoulRaise. Is we understand that most carriers aren't going to have one system. That's a pipe dream, and actually doesn't happen. You're going to have, like Leslie mentioned, sometimes your business rules in some of the carriers that don't have a communications tools are still sitting in documents. It's in these policy documents. So you've got that challenge. You've got these disconnected systems with my policy lives XYZ. You may have some other system like an Excel spreadsheet, your shoebox policy that lives in ABC, right? So the goal is, how can we use some of this technology? And it's not just one technology type, but it's like building a solution that we can pull data, right? Integrate data, package it up so that we can send it to the right channel. To Leslie's point, like how can we personalize the message? But if you have to go to 10 different places, there's no way you can personalize the message. But if Agentic AI can help you package, orchestrate, and find that information and give it to a system, oh my goodness, you layer sentiment analysis on top of that. Now you look at the history of all the different communications that have been going. What are they calling in for? That's the vision, right? That's the promise of what some of these solutions like ours, what Leslie's bringing to the table, can bring to the industry, because there's a void, right? But it's not just one tech solution, not one magic wand that can solve it. It's going to take I know ecosystem gets thrown around a lot, but it is truly partners. No carrier wants to put all their eggs in one partner basket. You're going to talk about risk. That's a huge risk, right? But if you build an ecosystem that allows you to see how people can work together with the right accountability and mix, we can think about communications of the future, right? Like the stuff that OSG is promising. If this was in me in my maternity world days, how cool would it be that after I got through my maternity process, I didn't have to call like 10 times to say, did you get my document? Did you get my fax? Even though I double faxed it, because as a technologist, I know they never get the first document. You have to fax it again. But these are tricks I know because I'm in technology, but your common person, what's my benefit structure look like? When, do you need additional requirements? There's so much data. Like if I could have a personalized picture of what I'm going to get that's empathetic, that helps me understand from a common man perspective, that's where the future is heading. And it's going to take technologies like Agentic AI, Gen AI, automation, good systems to do the work.
And I'd like to add on, Bobby, because carriers, I think, are missing an opportunity that the communication experience is another data source that should be used as continuous yet data back into the process. So how did someone react to a communication? Did they get it and then followed immediately with a call? Did they poke around on a digital document and that came to a stop in one particular content zone that troubled them? Or where did they spend the most time in a document? And then being able to have that information potentially in advance, kind of early signals, so that when they do get in touch with you or maybe with their advisor, then somebody knows kind of what happened after it left the carrier. And they're being able to use that data, take it back in, and then use that in some way when you're about to do the next communication to either change the language, change the reading level, orchestrate on a different channel, or orchestrate in a different timing. All of the things that could benefit your business, right? By making sure you're hitting that next best message, next best channel, and anticipating what the action should be. And that's where I think some of the promise of the AI tools is going to help with that. And then communications don't become an obligation. They actually become a value source.
So, Leslie, what I'm hearing from both of you guys is AI by itself is not going to solve this problem. Like there's a strategic element. There are some technological considerations. I think there's a belief that AI is going to come in. AI will generate the documents. AI will solve this. But if there's not an over layer of strategy and understanding of how the pieces work, Leslie, to your point, like even with the AI, it's still going to require what OSG does, a policyholder journey to try to recognize, oh, here's Bobby. She just had a baby. She's at this stage. She might be going through this emotionally. Here's how the wording must be. From what I'm understanding from both of you, AI is not going to solve that problem. It's a tool, very powerful tool, but it's still going to require a human in the loop to tie pieces together.
And we spent a lot of time when we were prepping talking about the governance aspect of all of this. Human in the loop is just one aspect of governance. But the content management and composition platforms that I was talking about that really manage the compilation of the information that goes into the communication, those are rules that have to be tested. And to meet your regulatory obligations, you need to know that they're going to run the same way every time, right? So that we make sure our communications are intact and they're correct and they're delivered in a timely way. And so that requires oversight. That requires governance. I've worked on projects in my career in the communication space where, an audit or a market conduct exam finds the fact that you're sending out inconsistent communications on different channels or through different means or different systems. And those can really come back to haunt you. So you need to have that strategy and governance in order to make sure that the ecosystem, as Bobby said, is working like harmoniously and accurately. And we know there's a lot of regulation in the AI space that's coming as well. And we're starting to see it. I just saw something posted today that I think it was in New York, maybe it's New York or New Jersey, just started debating a law that is going to require all claims adjudication to be able to prove that a human had actually reviewed it and be able to prove out all the rules and input that went into it. And I think you'll see the same thing in the communication space as well, because the outcome of that adjudication is going to be a communication.
Yeah. Bobby, you said something in our prep session where you said you don't want AI to create something new, especially around communication. As Leslie was talking, I'm just like, oh yeah, you need consistency.
Yeah.
You can't just slap an AI on there and all of a sudden, like every letter that goes out is different. The AI is trying to do it right, but it's not holding to the governance or the standards of a particular company. Can you talk a little bit about like the drawbacks unleashing AI through an organization and why you need standards, you need governance, you need strategy. And so you're picking and choosing where the AI is actually functioning. And there's a lot of oversight on what the AI is actually doing.
Yeah, it goes back to when we think about a piece of correspondence, right? Whether we make it hyper personalized or not, it's at the root of it, consistency matters. And if you're not, to Leslie's point, are consistent, why it just, to me, I scratch my head for something like a piece of correspondence that needs to go out. Why would you even waste resources, AI resources, and dollars and CPU on something that a rules engine is really meant to do? Because it just makes no sense. I think oftentimes when we are faced with a technology and AI, like Gen AI, more Gen AI and Agentic AI, I think we start to dream about, well, we could do this and this. And there's a notion of could we versus should we that we have to balance. Could we? Heck yeah, we could do anything we want to. But should we? Does it make sense to do that? Common sense would say, no, this is the same process that needs to be repeated 50,000 times, right? Or whatever times. Why would you have an engine that will just, there's a hallucination issue too. With a lot of these, not everybody has solved for the hallucination issue that's happening in AI. What happens if you send a communication to a person? We have to look at it from a legal perspective too. And that's why some of these regulations that Leslie's talking about, it's going to get much more stricter. And then it will start to relax. It's a cyclical effect with any technology. But we're seeing with a lot of the technology like AI that we see in the news, it's creating more harm because there's not a good governance model. And now we're going to see more tighter regulations. We're going to see much more tightening up than we are seeing loosening. This is why everybody's talking about human in the loop. There has to be human in the loop. But I think the human in the loop is going to be there for a long time in our industry before it relaxes because of the black box effect, making sure people are not just using tech just for tech's sake. Like, we're going to see a lot of these in the next couple of years, more of these cases come through that's going to tighten up a little bit more before we can start to know how to really use it. And then we'll see a little bit more relaxation around it.
Yeah. So Leslie, how can we personalize and create empathy in our documentation, knowing that there's this like there is this tight regulation around it? It sounds like there has to be a structure and a formula for companies committing to wanting to do empathetic communication, but they have to do this ahead of time. This isn't something that AI is going to be able to solve at the point of a claim or at the point of invoice. A company has to decide, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. And they almost have to get all of the material ready at the starting line with all of the data. And this is what it's going to be filled. And this is how we're going to personalize it. they need to have a strategy that can incorporate AI, but it has to get to a point where it's like humans have signed off on it, and whatever's in the policy communication management system is set and ready to go. How would you suggest going about doing something like that?
I think it comes back to, first of all, you have to understand your customer's journey. So that journey mapping is critical. And then identifying the moments that really matter in that journey, right? Bobby's example, a disability journey, for example, could be for anything, let alone maternity. But having an understanding of where that person is sitting, empathy comes from putting yourself in somebody else's shoes first, right? And understanding what's important to them and why. Then you can start sourcing the information and the data to augment that empathetic point of view. Like, how can, first of all, it's word, right? Words matter and the how that you say something, but also having that full contextual view of that customer's experience with you from the time they purchased your product to where they are in that point in time. And that's where I think the agentic AI solutions can help extract information and data from sources that maybe were closed off previously because of legacy complexities or just prioritization or other issues. So it opens up avenues to bring more information and data points into it so that you can truly personalize it and then layer over that voice and tone and sentiment to make sure that it's coming across as empathetic. Just Bobby's example, she was faxing things and maybe they were never received. That's really frustrating. Being able to know that she might have called up and complained about that before, just acknowledging that up front is an example of empathy and personalization, which is, we know that you're frustrated and with the process, and here's what we're going to do about it. Here's how we're going to make it better. But if you don't even know any of that, because that was a different department, we were taking inbound cases, has no idea. And then the next person in the value chain has no idea what happened earlier. And that's what breaks things down. And that's why people get frustrated and disgruntled that their carrier, like, how does this company not know? How does the left hand not know what the right hand is doing? We always hear that. And we say it ourselves because we experience it every day with some of our services.
I think,
Bobby, can that go ahead, please?
no, I was going to say what Leslie just summarized is what is the most exciting promise for some of these tools that we've seen come out. And even like some of the stuff that we're doing, coupled with a solid platform, is going to solve, right? If we can get all of this data that's untapped, has never been reached in the past, and now it's available because there's absolutely no excuses. We can get the data, we can package it, give it to it like the grocery store, right? Here, I'm running around all the different aisles and packaging all the goods, and I'm going to give it to a person. So much faster and more efficient way of just doing work, but now the customer wins. When we talk about like these communication points, right? Like, it's how do you do the right thing for the customer? The customer wins because you're solving my pain point. I may not want to talk to a carrier because I have that information in my fingertips and that's all I needed to know. But if you didn't know what the right hand or the left hand was doing, it's gonna result in more friction process, and the cycle continues.
Bobby, can that be done with companies who have legacy debt, tech debt? Can we get to a point for them where they have data scattered? So I get the agentic AI, you can unleash it and go out and start to pull data into data lakes. You can create workflows, but ultimately, let's say you had a problem and you weren't sure if they received your communication. Can we, even with tech debt, can we get to a point where the left hand knows where the right hand is doing, where Bobby can get a text message on your watch that says, we received this claim that you filed. Do these older companies with these tech debt, is this an opportunity for them as well?
Absolutely. I think that's the most exciting piece about agentic AI is we oftentimes talk about in the life world, we're still seeing systems in the 1970s, mainframes, right? Green screen technology exists. They exist in PNC, but they exist in quite a bit. There was a statistic that I was looking at. 72% of insurance is still running off of legacy systems, which means you don't have APIs to get that data. Agentic AI can pull and push data. We have those capabilities in Solraise using, we call it our genes. Our desk gene, brow gene has that capability. So that it allows us to pull that data from all these different sources so that we can package it up and provide it to a system in a cleaner way and make it easy to integrate. So there are solutions out there now that can pull and push data from mainframes. Like we're doing that right now.
And it's important to understand that does not replace a rules engine for content management and composition. What it does is it feeds the rules engine for content management. So you still have to understand your data. You still have to have a strategy on how to use it. You still have to have a structured way back to regulation, right? It still has to be structured. It has to be repeatable. It has to be accurate. But you're now being able to bring a lot more information into that funnel. And the challenge will then be, okay, how do I incorporate all this? Like, I really do think agentic AI is going to open up this world of possibilities to make the communication experience and chatbots and things where, remember, communications are structured outbound type of experience, but you have customers coming in all the time who have ad hoc questions. Today, they call the contact center. Many people like myself who might not have time to wait on hold, I'm always going to try to go to a chatbot first and see if I can get service that way because it can do it in an asynchronous fashion and it works for me. But those questions could come out of left field. So how do you use that data to augment those responses as well? And I think that's where more of the Gen AI solutions will come in. But it all has to work together. And therefore, you have to have some sort of strategic blueprint for how you're going to accomplish that.
It sounds like the AI is not going to create your strategy.
You might hallucinate. We don't know. Maybe give us a loop on that one.
Though still across the board, we're talking about communication, but across the board around the different functions that have to occur, there needs to be a strategy. The different types of AI can assist in that, but they can't actually do the strategy. They can't actually execute on it. And you almost be getting yourself into trouble by over relying on the AI to take the place of a human in many of these functions.
Definitely an enabler.
Yeah, we see it as an enabler, right? We see it as that virtual assistant that we wished we had that we now can have. That's how we're positioning it in the market.
And it frees up resources and talent to focus on higher value functions, right? As opposed to navigating to this shared drive, looking up values in this spreadsheet or in this library, and then manually crafting communications or having to parse through a whole bunch of rules. So you're having help to get there faster, but it isn't going to replace that human aspect.
Yeah. So I want to finish up our conversation around firms that maybe have been timid they want to do something, they're timid to do something, they recognize there's some risk here. What are some steps executives at insurance organizations should be taking to start to think about implementing some of this? I've heard different things from, hey, find a particular use case and have AI solve that particular use case, to other folks say, yeah, don't do that. You should really go across an entire workflow or entire line of business. So for both of you, if we're thinking about this, what are steps that organizations should be taking if they want to begin to leverage and have AI be this tremendous tool and resource.
I've oftentimes shared in the past, crawl, walk, run, but that doesn't mean you just keep crawling in a snail pace. This is the time where you do use those principles of crawl, walk, run. And if carriers are serious about modernizing their operations, and not everybody's going to rip and replace their admin system day one, right? It's a journey. We're on a journey. Transformation never ends, to be honest with you. You can't say, I'm going to be like, it's a continuous process, right? I think now is the time to explore and have a landscape of what are the different processes, what's the low-hanging fruit that we could start to deploy some of these tools that could really help transform. We at ITC, we did this workshop called the AI Shift, where we walked organizations. We had over 30 carriers come through this on Monday before the conference. And that was, how do you look at your department? Let's pick one operations area. And within that operations area, let's look at one process area to start testing and learning, but truly doing test and learning, but not, I'm going to do this in a squirrel moment and I'm going to leave. You've got to learn. And that's how, if you do crawl, walk, run in the right way, we can go to run, not in 3 years, but in maybe 6 months, a year. I'm beautiful.
When I hear you say crawl, walk, run, and you say not the usual crawl, it's the 1-year-old that's ready to walk, but is like scurrying as they crawl, like they're crawling really fast kind of thing, and not just like extending their crawl really slowly over an extended period of time. Leslie, do you have a thought on how you come from the communication side, how companies should be thinking about that specific function and how they should be incorporating technology and essentially it's a lot of the innovative stuff that you're doing at OSG?
So I would agree with the way that Bobby phrased it, as I'd pick a couple of processes to drill down on and then see. But what I find that happens is often the communication component is left off when these types of analysis is being done and they're trying to put together new strategies. So you have to include communications as part of that value chain and not leave it off, because I think sometimes carriers think it ends at the black box once that transaction is processed. Oftentimes the blinders are on and you don't think about what happens after that. So thinking about the communication, conducting focus groups, understand how it's landing, do some UX testing around your communication, and also tracking to see how is your operation impacted by those communications after the fact, like what happened after it went out. And so picking a few moments that matter and then putting the hat on of what's the art of the possible with this communication? How could it be better? And then going backwards to figure out where the data is to make that experience better. And then you can use all of these tools to start to extract it and collate it together to make it useful and build some sort of purpose-built solution. So that's how I would go.
Yeah. For both of you, this is awesome conversation. For the audience, if you're listening, you can add comments. This is on LinkedIn Live. So as long as Microsoft doesn't pull the plug on LinkedIn, this webinar will live forever. So if you tag myself, Leslie, or Bobby in the comments below, we will see it on LinkedIn. So if you have questions that you weren't able to ask or get answered during this webinar, you can ask them post webinar. But Bobby, Leslie, thank you so much. I think that was a great way to end the year heading into 2026 on how people should be thinking about AI, generative AI, agentic AI, but more importantly, I think strategy.
And thank you so much, Nick. And I would say one more thing. Let's start to do more acting. Like, let's execute on some of these things, because these are technologies that are evolved. They're here. It's not like the blockchain model of 2017, 2018. This has the capacity. This is here. This will impact. It's not going to go away if I wait another year. And I think we have to start learn how to act and not just talk.
Parting words, Leslie?
Let's get started.
I love it. I love it. So happy holidays to all when you're watching this. And Bobby, thank you. Leslie, thank you. For the audience, thank you. Leave comments in the section. And until next time, appreciate you guys watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.